My name is Ethan. I'm 28 years old and I'm a photographer. If you asked me if I ever thought I would one day experience such a turnaround in my life when I first came to Paris 6 years ago, I would have scoffed. But life is like that. It always hits you in the head when you least expect it. It was a perfectly ordinary Wednesday afternoon, and as usual I was taking pictures of tourists under the Eiffel Tower. The June sun was generously shining on the streets of Paris. Tourists were bustling about, and the aroma of coffee and croissants filled the air. It was supposed to be a calm and beautiful afternoon, just like countless other afternoons in the past. I had just finished taking a picture of an Asian couple and was about to adjust my camera when I felt a gust of wind and heard a thud. A blonde girl crashed into me, and my camera fell to the ground. "Oh geez, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, crouching down to pick up the camera. I bent down as well, and our hands met above the camera. The moment I looked up, my breath stopped. She had sea-blue eyes that sparkled like stars in the sunlight. At that moment, it was as if the whole world was quiet and only the two of us were left. I'm Ethan," I stammered, feeling like an idiot. She gave a smile that was brighter than the sun at the top of the Eiffel Tower. "I'm Amelia. Really sorry for bumping into you. I hope your camera is okay." I checked the camera, and luckily there were just a few scuffs. "It's okay, it's fine," I said, then ghostly added, "But maybe you could buy me a cup of coffee as an apology?" I immediately regretted my abruptness, but surprisingly, Amelia smiled and nodded. Of course, I happen to know a nice cafe nearby. We sat in a small cafe on the Champs-Élysées, the sunlight streaming through the glass vases on the cherrywood tables and casting dappled shadows on the tablecloths. The sunlight filtered through a glass vase on a cherrywood table, casting dappled shadows on the tablecloth, and Amelia told me she was an art student who had just arrived in Paris from New York. We chatted about our work, our lives, and our feelings about the city. "You know," Amelia said thoughtfully as she stirred her cappuccino with a spoon, "I've always felt that there's something magical about Paris that makes you forget the passage of time." I looked at the side of her face, the sunlight gilding her blonde hair with a soft glow. "Yeah," I whispered, "especially when you meet the right person." Amelia turned her head and our eyes met in the air. At that moment, I felt my heart race, as if something had awakened in my chest. I could never have imagined that this seemingly beautiful encounter would be the beginning of something that would change my life. And what joys and sorrows Amelia, the blonde girl who came into my life, would take me through. As we said our goodbyes, the sun was setting and the Eiffel Tower was lit up in the twilight. Amelia gave me her phone number and said she hoped to see me again. Looking at her back, my heart was filled with anticipation and a little anxiety. That summer, there seemed to be a touch of magic in the air in Paris. Amelia and I began to see each other more often, and each encounter convinced me that she was the one I had been waiting for. Our second date was in the heights of Montmartre. I had my camera and Amelia had her sketchbook. The sunlight poured gently over the cobblestone paths, and the melody of an accordion played in the distance. We strolled through the narrow alleyways, stopping to watch street performers or explore a hidden store. "Ethan, look." Amelia suddenly took my hand and pointed to an old artist who was painting. "Let's go and ask him to paint us a picture." I hesitated. "Are you sure? Those street portraits are usually—" "Oh, don't be so serious." She laughed and said, "It's the process that counts, not the result." And so we sat in front of the painter, Amelia leaning on my shoulder with a big smile on her face. At that moment, I suddenly realized that I had begun to fall in love with this girl who was always full of energy and adventure. In the following days, we traveled to every corner of Paris. In the Louvre, we took selfies in front of the Mona Lisa and made some funny faces on purpose. On the banks of the Seine, we sat by the river, shared a bottle of red wine, and chatted late into the night. In Notre Dame, we made good wishes and looked forward to the future. Amelia is like a fresh wind that blows away the darkness in my life. She taught me to see the world through the eyes of an artist, and I showed her the charm of photography. We learned from each other, appreciated each other, and found the missing piece of the puzzle in our lives. However, happy times always fly by. Before you know it, Amelia's time studying abroad is coming to an end. That night, as we stood under the Eiffel Tower and watched its twinkling lights, Amelia leaned into my arms and whispered, "Ethan, I don't want to leave Paris. I don't want to leave you." I hugged her tightly, my heart beating wildly. I knew this was the turning point in our relationship and my chance to prove myself. "Then don't go." I whispered, "Marry me, Amelia." I whispered, "Marry me, Amelia, and let's make our own story together in Paris." Amelia looked up, tears in her eyes, but the most beautiful smile I've ever seen on her face. "Ethan, I do." We embraced and kissed under the tower, and the tourists around us erupted in applause. At that moment, I felt like the happiest person in Paris. The wedding was simple, but full of romance. We exchanged rings in a small church near Notre Dame in Paris, and Amelia took my breath away in a simple white dress. The moment we said, "I do," I felt like the whole world was cheering for us. For our honeymoon, we chose to travel around Europe. We kissed on a gondola in Venice, made a wish at the Wishing Fountain in Rome, ran through the tulip fields in Amsterdam. Everywhere we went, we took a picture to immortalize the moments forever. Back in Paris, we rented a small apartment and started living together. Amelia found a job in an art gallery, and my photography career flourished. Our life seemed to be on track, and every day was full of sweetness and anticipation. However, I had overlooked the fact that the mundane routine may be the greatest test of love. As time passes, our lives fall into a dull cycle. Work, go home, sleep, work again. The little things that used to make us so excited have gradually become commonplace. I started to work more, hoping for a breakthrough in my career, while Amelia became more and more immersed in her art world. We communicated less and seemed to have less in common. Sometimes, when I came home late at night and saw Amelia's sleeping face, I would wonder if our love was like the Parisian night, which had quietly faded away from its initial warmth, leaving only a calm afterglow. But I'll soon get rid of that thought. After all, we've come this far, through so much. I believe our love is strong enough to stand the test of time. Until the night that changed everything came. Time flies. Amelia and I have been married for 3 years. Life is like a cup of unstirred coffee, calm on the surface, but you know all the sediment is hidden at the bottom. Our apartment is filled with photos I took of Amelia and her paintings, a record of our time together. But lately, I feel as if these memories have become dusty, blurred, and distant. That morning, I woke up early as usual to go to the studio. Amelia was still sleeping. I dressed gently, and when I got to the door, I suddenly remembered something and went back to the bedroom. "Honey," I whispered, "don't forget we have a dinner date tonight." Amelia gave a vague hem and rolled over to go back to sleep. I sighed and gently closed the door and left. In the evening, I came home early and put on a new shirt. Looking at myself in the mirror, I couldn't help but remember how I looked when we first met. At that time, I was also waiting with great expectation to meet her. At 7:30, I sat in the dining room with the candle burning quietly in front of me. At 8 o'clock, Amelia finally pushed open the door and walked in. "I'm sorry, my dear," she said hastily. "There was a delay in the gallery." I forced a smile. "It's okay. The important thing is that you're back." We started eating and chatting about our respective work, Amelia excitedly talking about the new exhibition coming up at the gallery, and me talking about a big project I'd recently received. Suddenly, I realized that Amelia's attention wasn't on me at all. Her gaze traveled over my shoulder and landed somewhere in the dining room. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing," she snapped, "just thinking that a painting would look good in that spot." I turned my head and saw our wedding picture hanging there. I opened my mouth to say something, but in the end, I just nodded in silence. After dinner, we walked side by side through the streets of Paris. The evening breeze of early fall was a little cool, and the sycamore trees rustled by the side of the road. Our hands were held together, but we couldn't feel the warmth we once had. "Ethan," Amelia snapped, "do you ever get the feeling that we've been different lately?" I stopped and looked her in the eye. "You mean between us?" She nodded, her eyes twinkling a bit. "I don't know. I just feel like we're getting farther and farther apart." I took a deep breath and tried to say something in rebuttal, but the words came out as, "Maybe we're all too busy. When this time passes, everything will be fine." Amelia smiled reluctantly and said nothing. We walked on, an indefinable heaviness in the air. When I got home, Amelia went straight into the bathroom. I sat on the sofa in the living room, staring at the wedding photo on the wall. In the photo, we were smiling so brightly, with happiness shining in our eyes. But what about now? Are we slowly turning into the kind of ordinary couple who only talk about food and water every day? I picked up my cell phone and tried to send Amelia a sweet message. But after typing for half a day, I didn't know what to say. In the end, I simply wrote, "Good night, honey." Lying on the bed, listening to the sound of water rushing in the bathroom, I suddenly felt an inexplicable panic. Our love is silently passing away? Can we still find the same passion at the beginning? While I was thinking about it, Amelia pushed open the bathroom door and came out. She was wearing the pajamas she bought on our honeymoon, and her hair was still dripping. For a moment, I saw the girl who made my heart flutter. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing my gaze and smiling. I shook my head and reached out to pull her into my arms. "Nothing. I just think you're beautiful." Amelia leaned into my chest and whispered, "Ethan, I love you." "I love you too," I replied, but for some reason, the words sounded so pale and weak. That night, we embraced each other and slept. But I couldn't sleep for a long time, and a question kept echoing in my mind. Is our love slowly becoming a habit? Outside the window, the night in Paris is still mesmerizing. But I knew that underneath the beauty, a storm might be brewing. And I seemed to have sensed something, but was unwilling to face it. I wish that time could stop right now and not take another step forward. Because I'm afraid that if we take another step forward, we may never be the same again. That fall, it seemed to rain extraordinarily in Paris. I often stood in front of my studio window and watched the raindrops hit the glass, forming sinuous watermarks. These watermarks were like the growing rift between Amelia and me, small but impossible to ignore. Things took a turn for the worse on a normal Tuesday. That day, Sophie, my assistant, ran into the office with gusto, waving a document in her hand. "Ethan, we got a big project," she said excitedly. "It's a fashion shoot for Vogue magazine, set in Venice, Italy." I froze for a moment, then broke into a smile. "Great! That's a big opportunity." Sophie moved closer and lowered her voice. "But the filming cycle will probably last about a month. Do you think Amelia will agree?" I was silent. Amelia was preparing for her solo exhibition and was in a state of euphoria. I was a little uneasy about leaving her alone in Paris. "I'll talk to her about it," I finally said. However, when I brought it up that night, Amelia's reaction was unexpected. "A month?" She frowned, but quickly stretched. "Actually, that's just right. It's the busiest time of the year for me to prepare for my painting show, and I can devote myself to it if you're not around." I was a little surprised and a little lost. "Are you sure? It won't seem too selfish to me?" Amelia came over and kissed me gently. "Don't be silly. This is your career. Of course I support you. Besides, it's not like we can't live without each other." Her last sentence somehow sent a shiver down my spine. Yeah, we really can't stay away from each other? With that, I departed for Venice. For the first few days, Amelia and I were still video calling every day. But as the work progressed, our contact became less and less frequent. Sometimes, when I came back to the hotel in the early hours of the morning and saw Amelia's good night message, it was already the next morning. Sophie became my closest companion in Venice. Not only was she great at her job, but she always brought joy when I was at my most tired. A few times, when I was staring at my computer, wondering if I should call Amelia, Sophie would bring me a cup of coffee at the right time or suggest a relaxing trip to a nearby trattoria. Slowly, I found myself looking forward to time alone with Sophie. There was an energy about her that Amelia once possessed, but now seemed to have lost. One night when we were working late, Sophie suggested that we go to the roof terrace of the hotel to get some fresh air. It was a beautiful night in Venice, and the moonlight sparkled on the canals. We stood side by side, talking about work and our lives. "Ethan," Sophie suddenly turned and looked me straight in the eye. "Have you ever wondered what you would choose if life presented new possibilities?" I froze, my heart suddenly racing. Just then, my cell phone rang. It was Amelia. I picked up the phone in a panic. "Hi, honey." "Ethan." Amelia's voice sounded a little excited. "Guess what happened? I met my college friend Lucas, who is now an art critic." He said he'd be willing to write a critical essay on my exhibition. I forced myself to focus. That's great, honey. I'm happy for you. I felt a pang of guilt as I hung up the phone. I looked over at Sophie, and there was a flash of disappointment in her eyes, but it quickly returned to normal. Sorry, Sophie, I said. I think I should go to my room. Sophie nodded and whispered, Good night, Ethan. Back in my room, I lay on my bed, my mind replaying the scene from earlier. Sophie's words, Amelia's excited voice, and my own mixed feelings. I suddenly realized that I was standing on the edge of a dangerous cliff. Over the next few days, I deliberately distanced myself from Sophie. But at the same time, I noticed that Amelia's calls and messages were becoming less and less frequent. Every time we spoke, she was always talking cheerfully about her painting exhibition and the advice Lucas had given her. I, on the other hand, began to feel alienated from her life. Finally, on the last night in Venice, things got out of control. Our team was celebrating the success of the project at the hotel bar. After 3 rounds of drinks, Sophie suddenly took my hand and dragged me to a corner. Ethan, her eyes glistened with tears. I know I shouldn't be like this, but I'm in love with you. I felt a wave of dizziness, not sure if it was from the alcohol or Sophie's words. Just then, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed me. In that moment, my mind went blank. When I came back to my senses, I realized I was responding to the kiss. Suddenly, my sanity returned. I pushed Sophie away violently and gasped, I'm sorry, Sophie, that I can't. I'm married. I fled to my room, my heart beating like thunder. I pulled out my phone and stared at Amelia's picture for a long time. What had I done? How could I? Just then, the cell phone rang. It was a message from Amelia. Honey, you'll be back tomorrow and I can't wait to see you. I have a surprise for you. My heart sank to the bottom as I watched the message. I didn't know what Amelia's surprise was, but I knew that my life was about to take a huge turn, and it was all a bitter fruit that I had planted myself. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Outside the window, the moonlight in Venice was still gentle, but I knew that what awaited me could be a storm strong enough to destroy our marriage. The day I returned to Paris, the weather was overcast, as if it was signaling something. I walked out of Charles de Gaulle Airport dragging my suitcase with a sense of apprehension. A month's separation, coupled with that ridiculous kiss, left me wondering how to face Amelia. I took a cab home, and as I passed the Louvre on the way, I remembered the first time Amelia and I came here. We were so happy then, so carefree. And now? I smiled bitterly, feeling like those memories had become so distant. The moment I pushed open the door to my home, I held my breath. The living room was quiet, and there was no Amelia. Amelia? I call out softly. There was no response. I went into the bedroom and found a note on the bed. Darling, I'm at the gallery preparing for the show. Meet me at La Palette at 7 p.m. I have a surprise for you. Love you, Amelia. I was relieved and at the same time felt a pang of guilt. Amelia was still working on our relationship, and I decided to take a shower and then go see Amelia. However, just as I was about to undress, something fell out of my pocket. It was a picture Sophie had given me, and on the back it said, Always remember the moonlight in Venice. I stared at the picture with mixed feelings. Just then, the doorbell rang. I hastily stuffed the photo back into my pocket and went to open the door. Standing outside the door was our neighbor Marie. Oh, Ethan, you're back? Marie said in surprise. I thought Amelia was home. I forced a smile. She's at the gallery. Can I help you? Marie hesitated. It's not a big deal. It's just that I've seen a man coming to your house a lot this month. I thought it was a friend of yours, but hearing you say that, I feel the blood curdling. Men? What kind of men? Marie describes blonde, tall, looks like an artist. They often came back together, sometimes late, barely maintaining my composure. I thanked Marie and closed the door. My mind went blank and only one name echoed, Lucas. I fell onto the couch and felt like the whole world was spinning. Amelia and Lucas? No, it couldn't be. There must be some kind of misunderstanding. But a little voice inside me said, Didn't you do the same thing? I stood up and started pacing around the room. I noticed Amelia's sketchbook sitting on the coffee table. I shouldn't be looking at it, but I can't help myself. Flipping through the sketchbook, my heart sank to the bottom. It was full of sketches of Lucas. Some were front portraits, some were side profiles, and some were of him painting. Each drawing was filled with tenderness and love. I continued to flip through, and a note fell out of the book. It was in Lucas' handwriting. Dear Amelia, last night's dance practice was fantastic. I can't wait to give your husband a big surprise the day he gets back. You're right. It's going to be a perfect birthday present. Love you, Lucas. I froze. Dance practice? Birthday present? I then remembered that the day after tomorrow was my birthday. I felt a wave of vertigo. I don't know if it was from shame or from relaxation. Amelia hadn't betrayed me. She was just preparing a surprise for me. I, on the other hand, had almost ruined everything. I looked at my watch, and it was almost 7 o'clock. I rushed out of the house and stopped a cab. La Palette restaurant, please hurry, I said eagerly. As the car traveled through the streets of Paris, my heart grew heavier and heavier. How was I going to face Amelia, and should I tell her what happened in Venice? Finally, the car pulled up in front of the restaurant. I took a deep breath and pushed open the car door. Just then, I saw Amelia and Lucas walking out of the restaurant, both talking and laughing and looking so close. I stood there, at a loss for words. Amelia looked up and saw me, a look of surprise on her face. Ethan, she ran over and hugged me. You're home early. I mechanically hugged her back, but my eyes fell on Lucas. He smiled at me in a friendly way and held out his hand. Hi, I'm Lucas. Amelia's dance partner. I froze for a moment, then reluctantly took his hand. Dance partner? Amelia said excitedly. Yes, that's what I'm going to surprise you with. We learned the tango and are going to perform it on your birthday. I looked into Amelia's sparkling eyes and was both touched and ashamed. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words turned out. That's fantastic, honey. I can't wait to see what you guys do. Amelia hugged me happily while I felt a pang of pain like no other. I knew that I had to make a choice, to confess everything or to bury that mistake in my heart forever. Just then, my cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Sophie. Missed you. I looked at the screen of my cell phone and then at Amelia's happy, smiling face and suddenly felt a sense of suffocation. I realized that my choice was not only about me, but about all the people who love me and whom I love. And it's a choice that will change our lives forever. Segment 6. Rebirth under the Paris Tower. Confessions. I barely slept that night. Amelia breathed quietly beside me while I tossed and turned, my mind a jumbled mess. Sophie's text, Lucas's appearance, and the surprise Amelia had planned for me all felt like a jumbled mess that took my breath away. Early in the morning, I got up gingerly, not wanting to wake Amelia. I needed to be alone. I wandered aimlessly through the streets of Paris, and before I knew it, I came to the banks of the Seine. The sunlight poured over the river, sparkling the waves. Once upon a time, Amelia and I had strolled here and made a promise. Now, I'm standing on the brink of betrayal. I pulled out my cell phone and stared at Sophie's text message for a long time. Finally, I took a deep breath and decisively deleted the message before sending Sophie a reply. I'm sorry, Sophie. What happened in Venice was a mistake. I love my wife and I hope you understand. After sending this message, I felt like a big stone had fallen from my heart. But an even bigger challenge awaited me. How was I going to confess to Amelia? I sat down on a bench by the river and thought back to the day Amelia and I met. She knocked over my camera, and those apologetic blue eyes are still vivid in my mind. After all we'd been through together, was it going to be ruined because of a moment of weakness on my part? No, I can't lose her. I have to come clean. Even if it means possibly losing her, at least my conscience will be at peace. After making this decision, I felt a strange sense of calm. I stood up and decided to go home and face Amelia. I could smell the coffee as I pushed open the door to the house. Amelia was busy in the kitchen and saw me coming back with a big smile. Good morning, dear. Where have you been? I woke up and didn't see you and thought you were traveling again. Her words tightened my heart. I walked over to her and gave her a deep hug. What's wrong? Amelia asked softly, sensing my abnormality. I let go of her and took a deep breath. Amelia, there's something I need to tell you. We were sitting on the couch in the living room, and Amelia's eyes were filled with worry. I took her hand in mine and began to tell the story of what had happened in Venice. On my last night in Venice, Sophie and we kissed. I felt a pang of shame as I said the words, but I forced myself to continue. I immediately regretted it and pushed her away. But I still betrayed you and our marriage. I'm so sorry, Amelia, that I really am. After I said that, I didn't dare to look Amelia in the eye and just kept my head down, waiting for her reaction. Silence. A long silence. Finally, I heard Amelia sigh deeply. Ethan, look at me. Her voice was calm. I looked up and saw that her eyes were filled with tears, but more than that, they were a complex emotion that I couldn't read. I don't know what to say, she said slowly. I appreciate your honesty, but this is too sudden. I need time to digest this. I nodded. I understand. Do you need me to go away for a while? Amelia shook her head. No, I don't want you to leave. We've been apart for too long. But Ethan, I need you to prove to me that you still love me, that our marriage is worth saving. Her words gave me a ray of hope. I held her hand tightly. I will, Amelia. I'll do anything to make up for my mistake. I love you, more than ever. Amelia forced a smile, but I could tell she was still hurting inside. Well, maybe we can start with your birthday? She whispered. The dance Lucas and I prepared. Maybe it can be our new beginning? I felt a pang of guilt. Amelia was still thinking of surprising me after I had made such a mistake. I couldn't help but marvel once again at how lucky I was to have such a wife. Of course, I said, I'll savor every moment. Just then, Amelia's cell phone rang. It was Lucas. She looked at me for a second before picking up the phone. Lucas? Yes, he's back. No, no need to cancel. Yes, we'll still perform. Okay, see you tomorrow. After hanging up the phone, Amelia turned to me. Lucas says he's looking forward to the show tomorrow. Ethan, are you sure you're okay with this? I took a deep breath and said firmly, no problem. Amelia, I believe in you and in our love. I will prove with my actions that I deserve your forgiveness. Amelia nodded, a glimmer of relief in her eyes. But I knew that this was just the beginning. Our marriage was traumatized, and it would take time and effort to repair. And I, for one, am ready to face any challenge that may come my way. Because I know that Amelia is the person I want to spend my life with. No matter what difficulties lie ahead, we will face and overcome them together. This is love. This is marriage. It is not the fairy tale happily ever after, but choosing each other even after making mistakes and walking hand in hand in the face of difficulties. And I, for one, am getting ready to embark on this difficult but worthwhile journey. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up and Amelia was no longer with me. A note sat on the nightstand. Final preparations at the gallery. See you tonight. Love you. I stared at the love you for a long time with mixed feelings. Even though Amelia said she forgave me, I could feel the gap between us. I decided to surprise her. I called a couple of old friends to help me out and then began my plan. At noon, I arrived at Amelia's gallery. The moment I pushed open the door, I froze. The entire gallery was filled with pictures of us over the years, from meeting, falling in love, and getting married, with every important moment framed in a picture frame. Amelia stood in the center of the showroom and looked at me a little apprehensively. Surprise? This is my birthday present to you. I want everyone to see our love story. I walked up and hugged her tightly. Thank you, Amelia. This is the best gift I have ever received. I felt her trembling slightly in my arms and knew she was trying to repair our relationship as well. One more thing. I let go of her and took her hand towards a corner of the gallery. Close your eyes. Amelia gave me a puzzled look, but obediently closed her eyes. I gently turned her around and said, you can open them now. When Amelia opened her eyes, she covered her mouth in surprise. On the wall hung a huge painting of our first encounter under the Eiffel Tower. I had asked my artist friend to rush the painting from memory. Ethan, this is so beautiful. Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes. I held her hand. Amelia, I know I made a big mistake, but I want you to know that you will always be the most important person in my life. Our story isn't over, it's just beginning. Amelia turned and looked deep into my eyes. I know, Ethan. We'll work together, right? I nodded, feeling something inside me slowly healing. In the afternoon, we prepared for the evening party together. We don't talk and laugh as much as we used to, but at least we're together, working together, trying to work together. At 7 p.m., the guests were arriving. I still couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable when I saw Lucas walk in. But when I saw Amelia's reaction as she nervously watched me, I took a deep breath and walked up to shake Lucas' hand. Thank you for being there for Amelia during this time, I said sincerely, and I hope your show is a success. Lucas seemed relieved and smiled. That's for sure. We've been rehearsing for a long time. The music starts and Amelia and Lucas begin to dance. They moved beautifully and smoothly, drawing applause. I stood by, watching the smile spread across Amelia's face, and suddenly realized that I almost lost it all. After the dance, Amelia ran up to me with an expectant look on her face. How was it? I smiled and said, Fantastic. You danced beautifully. Just then, I noticed Sophie creeping into the gallery. My heart seemed to miss a beat, and I didn't know what to do. Amelia followed my gaze and suddenly turned a little pale. That's Sophie? I took a deep breath and decided to come clean. Yes, I invited her. Amelia, I want you to know that there is nothing left between Sophie and me. The person I love is you and only you. Amelia was silent for a moment, then nodded softly. I see. Thank you for telling me. I took Amelia's hand and walked over to Sophie. Sophie looked uncomfortable, but managed to force a smile. Happy birthday, Ethan. Amelia, hi. Amelia unexpectedly extends her hand. Thank you for coming to Ethan's birthday party. I hope you enjoyed our love story exhibit. I felt a surge of emotion, knowing how much courage it took for Amelia to do this. After the party, as we were packing up, Amelia suddenly said, Ethan, let's go watch the sunrise. I froze for a moment, then realized what she meant. Our first date was watching the sunrise on the banks of the Seine. We drove to the banks of the Seine and sat on a bench by the river. Amelia leaned on my shoulder and whispered, Ethan, all this time I've been wondering what love really is. I held her hand and listened to her quietly. I think true love is not the absence of cracks, but the choice to repair and start over after the cracks. Ethan, I choose to forgive you, and I choose to start over with you. I felt my eyes moisten and gently kissed the top of her hair. Thank you, Amelia. I promise I will spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. The sky is starting to whiten, and a new day is approaching. I know that our marriage may never go back to being like it was before, but maybe it can get better and stronger. Because we chose each other, we chose to love, we chose to forgive. We embraced and kissed in the morning light of Paris, as if we were back to the day we first met. I knew that there was more to our story, and that this was just the beginning of something new. In the days following my birthday, Amelia and I began a difficult but hopeful rebuilding journey. We agreed to have an honesty night, once a week, to sit down and talk about our feelings and thoughts. At first, these conversations were filled with awkwardness and silence, but gradually we learned to express ourselves better and to listen to each other. One night we were sitting on our balcony, looking out over Paris at night, when Amelia suddenly said, Ethan, I think we need some changes. I asked uneasily, what kind of change? She turned her head, her eyes firm. We all need some personal space. I was thinking maybe I could take that offer to do a show in New York. I froze. Amelia did mention the opportunity before, but we both felt the timing wasn't right. Now that she was bringing it up again, I didn't know how to react. How long will you be gone? I asked softly. 3 months. She replied, then quickly added, but I'll be back often. I took a deep breath and tried to calm my inner turmoil. I knew that if I objected, it would just look like I didn't trust her. Besides, this might actually be what we needed. Well, I finally said, if that's what you want, I'm with you. Amelia gave a relieved smile as she leaned over and gave me a warm hug. Thank you, Ethan. This is good for us all. And just like that, Amelia went to New York. For the first few weeks, I felt like my whole apartment was empty. I started to get more involved in my work and took on projects that required traveling. Every night, we would video call and share our daily routines. One day, Amelia excitedly told me that her work had received a lot of favorable comments, and she had even been offered to buy her paintings. I was happy for her, but at the same time there was a hint of loss. I began to realize that Amelia could get along just fine without me. This feeling unsettled me, but it also motivated me. I decided to get better, not only for Amelia, but also for myself. I started learning to cook and showed Amelia my new creations every time I videoed them. I also signed up for a photo contest using our love story as the theme. Time flew by, and the 3 months were coming to an end. Just the day before Amelia was due to return, I received an unexpected phone call. It was a director I'd met in Venice who invited me to shoot a movie in Rome. I hesitated. This was a rare opportunity, but it also meant I might have to leave Paris for a few months. I didn't know how to speak to Amelia. That night, Amelia gleefully videoed me talking about her plans to return soon. I worked up the courage to tell her the news. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a moment. Then I heard Amelia whisper, "Ethan, you should go?" "Really?" I was a little surprised. "Yes," her voice firmed up a bit. "These 3 months have taught me one thing. We need to grow individually to make our relationship stronger." I feel both relieved and touched. "Thank you, Amelia. I promise, I will come back to see you often." "I know you will," she said with a smile. "And besides, I can come and see you in Rome. I've always wanted to paint a view of Rome." We talked like that for a long time, discussing future plans. After hanging up the phone, I lay in bed and reflected on everything that had happened in the past few months. We had experienced betrayal, doubt, and pain, but ultimately chose to trust and support each other. The next day, I went to the airport to pick up Amelia. My heart raced when I saw her walk out of the arrivals gate. She was more confident than when she left, with a twinkle in her eye. We embraced and kissed each other as if to pour out all the thoughts of the last 3 months. "Welcome home," I whispered. Amelia looked at me with a smile. We created our own home, wherever that may be. We walked out of the airport hand in hand, the Parisian sunlight gently showering us. I know that there will be many more challenges waiting for us in the future. But right now, I just want to enjoy the joy of this reunion. Because I understand that true love is not about being inseparable, but about being more cherished in the midst of separation and more determined in the midst of turmoil. Amelia and I, we are writing a love story that belongs to us, and this story is far from over. The sunlight in Rome was even warmer than in Paris, as if it wanted to pour all its passion into the eternal city. I stood behind the camera, looking at the ancient buildings in front of me, and my heart was filled with emotion. 3 months ago, I was roaming the streets of Paris, and now, I was helming the camera for an international blockbuster. Life is so amazing, isn't it? Every night, I would video call Amelia. She would show me her new paintings, and I would share interesting stories about the shoot. Sometimes we would even watch movies together online, as if we were still in our little apartment in Paris. However, I have to admit that the separation does bring new challenges to our relationship. Sometimes, work is so busy that we may not speak for days. Sometimes, jet lag would make us miss each other. More often than not, I would lie alone in my hotel bed late at night, looking out the window at the night view of Rome and thinking about Amelia's temperature. One day, the director asked me to shoot a wedding scene. As I watched the actors playing the couple make their vows in front of the camera, I suddenly felt a pang of heartache. I remembered my wedding with Amelia and the promises we had made. That night, I called Amelia. "Hey, honey." Her voice came through the mic with a hint of exhaustion. "How was your day?" I was silent for a moment, then whispered, "Amelia, I miss you." There was silence on the other end of the line as well. Then I heard her say softly, "I miss you too, Ethan." We just listened to each other's breathing in silence, as if we could feel each other's presence in this way. "Amelia," I finally spoke up. "I was thinking that maybe we should renew our vows." "What do you mean?" She sounded a little surprised. "That is, when I get back to Paris, we can have a small ceremony to renew our promises to each other. This time, we've both been through more, and we know better." Amelia was silent for a moment, then I heard her chuckle softly, "Ethan, when did you become such a romantic?" I smiled back, probably infected by the atmosphere of Rome. "Yes," she said, with tenderness in her voice, "I'll wait for you to come back." After hanging up the phone, I felt a sense of strength in my heart. Yes, distance may make our relationship difficult, but it also gives us a chance to reconnect with ourselves and appreciate each other again. The following days, I focused more on my work. I gave my all in every shot. The director noticed the change in me and praised my performance. "Ethan," he said to me one day, "you know what? There's a special emotion in your shots. They're not just beautiful, they're full of love." I smiled and thought to myself about Amelia. Maybe it's because I found something really important in my life. Before I knew it, the shoot was coming to an end. The day before I was to go back to Paris, Amelia suddenly appeared on the set. I looked at her in surprise and couldn't believe my eyes for a moment. "Amelia, what are you doing here?" She smiled wryly. "I wanted to surprise you." I rushed up and hugged her tightly, smelling the familiar scent of her hair, and felt like the whole world was complete. That night we strolled through the streets of Rome. The old buildings looked mysterious in the moonlight, and the fountains along the street clattered softly. "You know," Amelia said suddenly, "I've done a lot of drawings of you in the meantime." I was a little surprised. "Really? I thought you'd be painting Roman landscapes." She smiled. "I did paint some landscapes. But more than that, it's how you look in those landscapes. I pictured you standing in front of the Colosseum taking pictures, or thinking by the wishing fountain. I felt a warmth inside. I always imagine you in Paris too. Every time I take a picture of a beautiful view, I think how wonderful it would be if Amelia were here." We looked at each other and smiled, then said in unison, "Let's go home." Yes, whether it's Paris or Rome, as long as we're together, it's home. The next day, we returned to Paris together. Standing under the familiar Eiffel Tower, I suddenly got down on one knee and pulled out a small box. "Amelia." I looked deep into her eyes. "Let's get married again." Amelia's eyes glistened with tears, and she nodded vigorously. "Yes, Ethan, I do again." In the evening sun of Paris, in the place where we first met, we made our vows again. This time, our love has been tested and made stronger. I know that whatever challenges await us in the future, we can face them together, because we chose each other over and over again. Our second wedding was much simpler than the first, but it felt much more real. There was no grand spectacle, no throngs of guests, just the two of us exchanging vows in a small church next to Notre Dame in Paris, witnessed by a few of our closest friends. When I put the ring on Amelia's hand again, I felt like my heart was almost beating out of my chest. This time, we both understood the true meaning of marriage. It is more than just a contract, it is a commitment between two people to grow together and support each other. After the wedding, our lives haven't changed much, but then again, we are different in every way. We value each other's company more and respect each other's personal space more. One night we were sitting on the balcony drinking wine and talking about our respective jobs. Suddenly, Amelia put down her glass and smiled mysteriously. "Ethan, I have news for you." My heart tightened, wondering what she was going to say. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. I froze, then sprang to my feet, nearly knocking over my glass. "Really? Gosh, Amelia, that's great." I rushed over and hugged her, so excited I could barely speak. The idea that we were about to become parents excited and terrified me at the same time. In the following days, we started to prepare for the new baby. I took on more local work and minimized my travel. I took on more local Parisian work and minimized my travels, while Amelia started experimenting with new subjects, saying that her pregnancy had given her a whole new creative outlet. However, life is always full of challenges. When Amelia was 6 months pregnant, I received an important invitation to go to Africa to shoot a documentary about wildlife conservation. It was a project I had always dreamed of, but it required being away for 3 months. I hesitated for a long time, wondering if I should take it or not. Amelia could see the nagging feeling and took the initiative to talk to me about it. "Ethan," she said, holding my hand, "you should go. It's your dream, isn't it? But your due date," I said with some concern. Amelia smiled. "Don't worry. I'll take care of myself and the baby. Besides, my mom said she'll come and stay with me. Don't worry about chasing your dreams." I look into Amelia's eyes with gratitude and love in my heart. How fortunate I am to have such an understanding and supportive wife. With that, I embarked on a journey to Africa. Every day, I would send Amelia photos and videos from the shoot. She, in turn, would send me some pictures of her paintings and her bulging belly. Though thousands of miles apart, our hearts have never been so connected. However, just a few days before I was due to return to Paris from the shoot, I received a call from Amelia's mother, who had gone into labor early. My heart hung in the air. I immediately booked the nearest flight, but it was still a nearly 20-hour flight to Paris. On the plane, I was fidgety, afraid I would miss the birth of my baby. When I finally made it to the hospital, it was early the next morning. I rushed into the labor and delivery room to see Amelia lying on the bed with a tiny swaddle in her arms. She looked up and saw me with a tired but happy smile on her face. "Come, look at your daughter," she whispered. I carefully took that little life and felt the whole world go quiet. My daughter, the fruit of my love for Amelia, was in my arms. "What should we name her?" I asked softly. Amelia thought for a moment and said, "How about calling her Lumiere, which means light, because she's like a light that illuminates our lives." I nodded, feeling my eyes water a little. Lumiere, it's perfect. And so it was that we welcomed a new member to our little family. Lumiere's arrival has made our lives more colorful and given us a new love to hold on to. Now, whenever I stand on the balcony and watch the scene of Amelia painting in her studio and Lumiere playing at her feet, I am reminded of everything we have experienced over the years. From the first time we met, to the crisis of our marriage, to rediscovering each other. Our love is like a bottle of vintage wine that has mellowed over the years. I understand that love is not the fairy tale of happily ever after, but in the daily life, always choose each other, always willing to work for each other. It is about working together in the face of difficulties, finding beauty in the ordinary, and cherishing each other in the little things of life. And I, Ethan, am lucky enough to have been able to write our own love story with Amelia in this beautiful city. This story continues, and I look forward to every chapter to come. Because I know that as long as we are together, no matter what we face, we can move forward. This is our love, reborn under the Paris Tower, growing through the trials of life, shining forever. Time flies, and before we know it, Lumiere is in elementary school. Today is the 15th wedding anniversary of Amelia and I. We decided to take our daughter to revisit the place where we first met, the Eiffel Tower. Standing under the tower, I couldn't help but drift off. 15 years ago, I met Amelia here, the blonde girl who knocked over my camera. Who would have thought that that chance encounter would be the beginning of our long love story? "Daddy, what are you thinking?" Lumiere asked me, tilting her little face up. She had inherited Amelia's blonde hair and my eyes, the best of our love. I knelt down and stroked her hair. "I wonder if we wouldn't have met if Mom hadn't hit me back then. Then won't I never be born?" Lumiere's eyes widened. Amelia came over and wrapped her arms tenderly around both of us. But we met. It was fate. I stood up and looked into Amelia's eyes. The years had left subtle marks on her face, but those eyes were still as bright as when I first saw them. "Remember our first date?" I asked. Amelia laughed. "Of course I remember. It was at that cafe where you got so nervous you spilled coffee on your shirt." We looked at each other and smiled as if we were back on that sunny afternoon. "Let's go to that cafe," I suggested, "and show Lumiere where we made our love." Strolling through the streets of Paris, we told our story to Lumiere. Meeting, falling in love, getting married, then that crisis, then finding each other again. "You almost broke up?" Lumiere asked in surprise. Amelia and I looked at each other and she whispered, "Yes, dear. Love isn't always smooth sailing. The important thing is that we chose each other and chose to forgive and start over." I held Amelia's hand tightly. That experience made me realize that true love is not the absence of conflicts and frustrations, but choosing each other even after all that. Walking into that cafe, we sat down in the same spot we had back then. Lumiere looked around curiously while Amelia and I got caught up in our memories. "You know," Amelia said suddenly, "that time you went to Africa to make a documentary, I was actually scared. I was a little surprised." "Really? You look so strong." She smiled. "I was afraid you would fall in love with that vast land and not want to come back. But then I thought, If that's really the case, it's your choice. To love someone is to have the courage to let go. I held her hand tightly, but I came back because my favorite will always be you and our family. Lumiere looked at us and said thoughtfully, "So love is about trusting and supporting each other?" We smiled at each other, and Amelia said, "That's right, honey. Love is about trust, about support, about being willing to stand behind each other as they chase their dreams, and about standing side by side in difficult times." When we left the cafe, the sun was setting right over the Seine. We stood by the river and watched the cruise ships slowly sail by. 15 years, I whispered. How does it feel? Amelia leaned on my shoulder. It feels like I had a long, beautiful dream and woke up to find that everything in it came true. I wrapped my arms around her waist. The best thing for me isn't having my dreams come true. It's having you by my side as we go through this together. Lumiere suddenly asked, "And have you regretted it? Regret getting married? Or getting back together?" Amelia and I laughed at the same time. I knelt down and looked into my daughter's eyes. "Lumiere, remember that there are no regrets in true love. Even if there are tough moments, that's what makes us grow and make the relationship stronger." Amelia adds, "Just like painting, there are no mistakes, only surprises. Every argument we have, and every time we make up, we are adding new colors to the painting called love." As night fell, the Eiffel Tower was lit up with bright lights. The three of us strolled through the streets of Paris, hand in hand, with Lumiere bouncing ahead of us, followed by Amelia and me. I know that our story continues. There may be new challenges, new trials ahead, but I am no longer afraid, because I realize that there is no difficulty that we cannot overcome if we join hands and hearts. Looking back at the past 15 years, I am overwhelmed with emotion. Our love, like the city of Paris, has gone through vicissitudes but still bright. It grows in frustration, shines in the ordinary, and mellows in the baptism of time. This is our love story, a story that began under the Paris Tower, continued through life's little moments, and ended up lasting forever in each other's hearts. And I, Ethan, am lucky to be able to continue writing this never-ending story with Amelia, because I know that the real forever is not a fairy tale ending, but choosing each other every day, choosing love, choosing to grow together. This is our understanding of living happily ever after. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.